On April 27th, 2 years ago, Freddie Gray's funeral and the oppression that you just heard about erupted into the youth uprising in Baltimore. On that evening, the pastors in the community called all the men to come out to march in the streets where the fires were still burning. Hundreds and hundreds of us showed up, and that was what you just saw. The fire is still burning, as you've just heard. If the youth are not initiated into the village, they will burn it down just to feel its warmth. On the day that I was funded by the Aspen Foundation to support youth ages 18 to 29 to find pathways to employment and entrepreneurship, randomly, a young man walked into my office. It never happens. Our office is in the hood. It's between the nail shop and the Chinese carryout across from the Hip Hop Chicken, and it's just a doorway that nobody knows what's inside of. And Eric walked in, and I said, "What brings you here?" He said, "My aunt told me I could get a job here." I said, "Well, that's interesting, because we just got funded today to do just that." I said, "What makes your soul sing, Eric?" And he said, "The revolution." And I said, "What do you mean by the revolution?" "My people have been held down for too long, and I want to help free them." I said, "Okay, little Huey." He said, "As in Huey P. Newton?" I said, "Oh, you know Huey P. Newton. Sit down." And I showed Eric a picture. And this was a drawing that I created from the words of young people to show them what we were going to build with that money. A system to get them over the fault that we have all created that they fall into because they were born black, they were born in Baltimore, they were born poor. So let's talk about Baltimore a little bit. Baltimore suffers an income distribution that parallels many, many places in the country. Those buildings at the top are not buildings. That's the income of the folks that live on the hill, which is at the top of Baltimore. And in the hood, that little red spot, where the income is less than $9,000 a year average, is where my office sits. We call it Old Town. Old Town used to be a thriving historic mall that was built in the 1850s that serviced the black community that's surrounded in all of the housing, public housing complexes, a highest concentration of public housing in the city and maybe one of the highest in the country. Today, that market that used to be there is now an open-air drug market, and the buildings are falling through with trees growing through the rooftops. In Old Town, 20% of black males 16 and over are employed. Only 7% of those are employed full-time. Now, can you imagine a community with 7% employment that's 98% African American? How do you survive? Well, across the water in Locust Point, which was a similar blue-collar neighborhood, the opposite is the case. 80% of the men over the age of 16 are employed full-time. I call this the old game. When I was in Minnesota about 10 years ago, I was throwing down with my boy Tabechi, beautiful black man, talented, creative. We were throwing down some dominoes, cussing each other out, talking about each other's mamas. And 3 hours into the game with Tabechi, I was exhausted. And it was a feeling that I have felt so often. And I call it the male paradigm. You win by making your opponent waste everything in their hands, and you win relative to their losing. And my brothers, we have perpetuated this paradigm on every part of the globe, and it is killing us, and it's killing the globe, and we need to stop. There's a system that's been constructed, and it looks a little like this. The most stable object on the planet is a triangle. And this triangle we heard about this morning. It was painted in so many different pictures, where the top of the triangle separates itself from the bottom of the triangle. Then the top of the triangle replicates itself throughout the entire triangle so that the bottom is just as separated as the top, because in a war, the bottom would kick ass and the top would lose. But in this war, it's the opposite. And in between the top and the bottom, in every colonialist invasion that has happened on the planet, there is a group that's put between, that are promised the keys to the kingdom at the top if they can oppress and keep down those at the bottom. You see it in Rwanda, and you see it in Baltimore, and you saw it for 400 years of slavery and the contemporary slavery of the prison complex. Well, there's another way, because there's pain at all points of this triangle, but if we begin to fold those points to the center, it creates a well and wellness, because what's needed at the top is found at the bottom, and what's needed at the bottom is found at the top. And if we bring them together and start to replicate, we are creating a pattern that can be replicated everywhere that actually creates wellness, because the isolation at the top, the individualism, the isolation of the masculine paradigm is just as devastating as the statistics that you've seen, only we never hear about it. It's the silent cry. We call this new pattern Cohado. So what's Cohado? Really, if you think about the top of the paradigm, the dominant paradigm, it's individualistic. It sees self as an individual idea. And the bottom is forced to be collective. When was the last time you heard the words white community put in the same sentence? You don't hear that. But if we can move from this small idea of one to an idea of one that incorporates us all, where oneness is what we're striving for, then selfishness creates a beautiful outcome, not a horrendous outcome. In Zulu, there's a word for this. We don't have an English word, which tells you something. The Zulu word is Ubuntu. And what Ubuntu means is that we are responsible for each other's well-being. We are responsible for each other's well-being. In other words, we are all one, like cells in a body. So Cohado is an idea that came to me. It's actually a Zulu word, and it actually means the long, sustainable view. And so a tool, an idea came to me, which is a game, because how do we learn all this? We learn through dominoes, Monopoly, and all of those games that teach us to be in that masculine paradigm. I said we need a new game, one that's bringing the feminine paradigm. That is the only reason we are here today, because the brothers would have killed it all, right? Sisters, do I hear that? And this is what it looks like at the end of a game. Let's look at the story behind it. Before there was anything, before the Big Bang, before creation, there was nothing, and nothing was everything. And she was cool with that, because everything was everything. It's the feminine side of spirit. And then a thought trace emerged that shattered that everything into what we have now, which is the universe. And that thought was, what am I? And that thought spread the fracture across that everythingness, so that now we have what we have here. But she couldn't see herself because she was everything. But you can't see you right now. What do you look like? You need me to see you, and I need you to see me. That's the two, the yin yang, the lightness and the dark. And when you have two things, it automatically creates three things. Those faces open up into the womb, the birthplace, the creative, the intuitive. It's the manifestation of that feminine spirit here on the planet. And once we have that, the foundation bones, we need a structure. And the four is the structure, but not necessarily like the four walls of this planet, but this room, but more like the four chambers of your heart that move the blood around the body to the point where if you stick your finger with a pin, it shows up. That's a badass structure. And then you come to the five, which is like your arms and your legs, like Da Vinci's Standing Man, or your five fingers. And in Latin, your hand is mano. It's about manifesting. What are you going to do today, now, to evolve what we have? You can fight against it and create turbulence. You can align with it. Or you can amplify it and create what we call flow. And once you have that, comes the six. It's like the spider web that holds all of this stuff together. It's community, beginning at its smallest element as family. And then we have the seven. And if you look at the structure, the white light is the zero. The 1 through 6 is the prism. And the 7 is a realized rainbow at the end of that. And that's really the concept of the game. How do we pull these pieces together? By simply creating assets and minimizing waste everywhere. And this is how you play. You already know how to play the game just by looking at that picture. Align 3 pieces and you create assets. Only put 2 together, you haven't activated them. Leave 1 hanging, don't leave anything hanging. That's how you play. So what does this look like on the ground? It begins with a vision. This is Old Town area, and this is what we conceptualize Old Town to be in, what was it, 2025, 8 years from now? And we do that by aligning the pieces in a way that links infrastructure, bricks and mortar development with human development to equal economic development. And we lay it out on the street so that you can have a table to sell your wares, you can then move into a booth, and then you can move into the marketplace so the entire ladder is visible to you in any second. And we do that by creating the Cohado incubator, which spawns that activity and supports it. And if we grow this incubator, then we will grow this prosperity and transform Old Town to the vision that we're talking about. And what's at stake to actually play this game? The first time I played with just men, the first dude put his piece down with his hand shaking like a leaf. The second brother pushed away from the table and said, no, I'm just gonna watch. They were petrified because we were never taught how to play this game, and we're afraid. So the problem is not the community, which is often blamed for the ills. The problem is the structure of the system that leaves communities hanging. And we need to wrap those communities up. And if you blur your eyes, this looks like a heart. And we need to fill that seam and create the circulation required to prosper and create prosperity out of these communities. And Huey said to me, after playing the game a couple of weeks ago for the first time, he said, I used to want to flip the pyramid upside down because I wanted our chance to be on top. He said, but Cohado taught me it's not about revolution, it's about evolution. And last week we got the prototypes to release the game here tonight. The startup of Cohado, the game, is releasing in this space this evening. And this is what Huey texted me when I posted those pictures on Facebook. The evolution, he always put 3s instead of E's. The evolution. And that's the kind of transformation that we're looking for. And if you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run together. And that's Cohado. So I hope you'll join us tonight at the event in the Crossroads. And we'll also have sheets so that you can bring Cohado to your communities, and I'll come with it, and we'll play, and we'll work, and we'll live, and we'll love. Thank you.